Hello there, Hoarders. We have a very special guest tonight. This is Reverend Robyne Marie, the New England Ghost Magnet. Is that what they call you correctly?
Yes.
Correct. Okay. She's a wonderful lady. She has incredible abilities, and we're going to interview her today. So, Robyne, you have been clairvoyant for quite a long time. Was there ever a moment in your childhood where you really realized it? Is there one singular moment when you were like, maybe I have a special gift, or did that come over a longer period of time?
It was quite natural.
Mm-hmm.
It came quite natural, and the first recollection that I have of it is at 4 years old, the first time that I can remember seeing spirit. But my family says that it started from birth.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. What was it like growing up as a child with such strong clairvoyant capabilities? Did it make you feel different? How did other students really respond to that, or did you kind of keep it concealed for a little while?
You know, as a child, you have such a simple mind, and so I just assumed everybody had this gift, and nearly everyone in my family has something like this.
Oh, wow.
And they were very supportive of it because they've all had experiences. And that's through different types of abilities or dreams and things like that that spirit comes to them. So I just felt as though that was part of my life, and everybody else was the same way. The only thing is my grandmother taught me to be very guarded as to how I presented messages, and as I got into school, she said I couldn't just blurt it out to people. I had to be more discerning as far as, you know, how I presented it to them. Because not everybody had it as to the degree that I had. Mm-hmm. Although I was always raised that everybody has this ability.
Yes, as you say, you do have a very gentle, calming nature about you that I find very nice. And you have the readings in the past for me, and it's always, you do have a way of revealing the information that's very comforting. So I thank you for that as someone who has. I hope
so.
Absolutely.
And I think it really comes with years of practice.
I'm sure it does. What would you say is the best part about having this gift?
The best part? Well, there's been many times that I've been able to kind of shed light on situations and help people avoid getting into some really difficult, challenging areas. So sometimes I've been able to save people from getting into accidents, which has been very good.
Oh, wow. Was there a part of it that was a drawback, or that is today, or is there anything, or have you just fully enjoyed this?
Well, certainly there's some things that I don't want to see, that I know is going to happen. Some things day to day we can change, and other things are more or less our path. We have to come in sometimes a direction of adversity to learn our greatest, what's inside of us. Our true inner faith, having sense of direction, problem solving, all of that's not going to happen if we don't come up through challenges. So there are certain things in our life that has to play out the way it is. As I said, day-to-day things we can change. So.
That's great. I was actually on your Facebook page today,
Mm-hmm.
and I was very interested to see your predictions for 2013. And a lot of them have gained a lot of traction.
They've already happened.
Absolutely.
Very scary, because I see a lot going on with Korea
mm-hmm.
and all of that.
Absolutely. And even the things in regard to the Pope and the President, everything's kind of changing in that landscape. Obviously,
yes.
We have a new Pope now.
And some things have been written and sealed. I put them away
mm-hmm.
because it is kind of devastating and frightening to people sometimes. And as I said, some things in our path we can't change. You know, global things, I mean, unless I was able to sit down with Obama or just sit with the Pope, you know, maybe I could talk to him about these things. But some of this is going to play out. And I don't ever want to cause panic mm-hmm. in anybody, certainly on a large level. So as these things come out, I reveal things that have been written, notarized, and locked away. So as the Pope, you know, I didn't want to disturb anybody or sound disrespectful in any way, but I knew that this Pope prior was going to step down.
Wow, that's incredible. You talked about being almost like an advisor if you ever were to sit down with President Obama or the Pope. I was wondering, I do remember you mentioning something in the past about working with police agencies.
Yes.
About working closely with cases cold and hot at the moment.
Yes.
Can you tell me about any of your experiences in regards to that? Or is that like strictly closed book?
Something that just came up this weekend, actually, and I'm sure you're familiar with Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they just found a body out in Clinton, and I had told them 2 years ago that there was something out there.
Oh, wow.
Specifically in that area. And of course, you know, it's up to people if they're going to listen to me or not. So I always hope for the best, but, you know, now it took 2 more years for them to go and look right in that area. And, of course, that played out. So again, it's things sometimes I don't want to see, but I can't help it.
Absolutely. And it seems that you do your best to use your powers as a source of good, which I think we're all very happy about.
Yes, and that's very important too. There's a lot of people who walk on the dark side, and so I try to stay in the light and stay positive.
Very much appreciated. I always wondered, because you live such an interesting life with seeing all these spirits and all these visions, do you ever watch anything that is like that, like on TV, in terms of reality television, or even in terms of movies? Do you watch paranormal movies, or do you tend to kind of let those go by without a notice?
I'm in them. So, you know, I kind of take a break and I stay away from that. And I don't want to have everything muddled in my head and my thoughts and be distracted by what other people are doing. You know, sometimes I flip through channels like everybody else and I catch the end of Ghost Hunters or this one or that one. And a lot of these people I know in person. Mm-hmm. So I understand as an entertainer as well, and being on stage since early childhood, that, you know, a lot of these things are sensationalized and sometimes fabricated. Mm-hmm. So, you know, this is what sells.
Absolutely.
So.
Would you say that you have like 3 favorite horror movies now or in your past or anything like that?
Absolutely. The Shining tops them all.
Brilliant movie.
The Shining is it. And I feel that it was just written so skillfully. And as far as the clairvoyancy and spiritual contact, it was all very realistic to me as a child. And I found that very interesting as the little boy that's the character in it. You know, how he connected with spirit and seeing the girls in the hall and seeing their memories, you know, blood coming out of the elevator. And these are things that I saw as a kid. So to me, that it was done very realistically.
That's great. That's actually kind of ties into another question. Is there anything in particular that ties into being realistic to you other than The Shining, or is there anything that you watch and you're like, absolutely not?
Well, I think depicting spirit itself, how a clairvoyant sees something. When I say I see something in the etheric body, that's full like you. So I'm seeing clothing, it's less transparent. That's very rare that happens. And of course we always see that in horror movies. They're all looking like you walking by. There's also a thing about clairvoyance that quite often the face is hollowed out. And I know that sounds scary in itself, but this is where the soul is more to the top of, you know, going to chakras and all of that and your spiritual balance. And that part is quite often missing. So, you know, you don't get a lot of detail in face. And when I see that in movies, that's not quite how we see it.
Okay, so would you say then, in terms of your description, that when you see these spirits, are their souls not connected to them still, or how does that work out? You can't see the soul.
It's a very good question, and I do a lot of research scientifically. I am an unusual medium because I do want to see the scientific end of things as well, because I want to be able to prove to the public what I'm seeing and hearing is factual. So scientifically, I look into these things. You know, why would a face be missing? Is their soul not there? Are we playing back in time, maybe like a dual existence? Am I looking at memories? Certainly we know of residual hauntings, and it's being played back like a tape recorder. You know, I always question things about that.
Absolutely. we've talked a lot about the spirits and how many spirits you see and things like that. Are there any famous spirits that you've communicated with, or anyone of note that you don't have to share?
I just did Charles Darwin, which
Wow.
was interesting. You know, it depends on who comes to me, and you know, I hold seances and all of that. So I'm going back and pulling out very historic people. For some reason, the Kennedys are very connected to me. They did know my family in person.
Oh,
They live here in Boston, you know, and in the area, so, you know, my family was tied in entertainment and politics, kind of this close line there. So, you know, I don't know if that's why they particularly come through to me, but seeing that in my home as a child and hearing about the Kennedys and assassination and all of that, I had to experience very, you know, as a toddler. And it was very passionate to me because my family knew them. So, you know, it was a little more emotional. And so they come to me in my dreams quite often, and they give me a lot of the messages.
oh wow.
So, and I connect with a lot of the celebrities and things that have passed.
That's really fascinating. Is there anything that the Kennedys should watch out for this year, or is there any new Kennedy news?
Yeah, there's actually some happy things, and,
Great,
and you
great.
may have read that on Facebook in the
Mhm.
notes, that there's a child coming. There's a couple of the Kennedys that are going to step into politics that
Oh, wow.
hadn't been involved. And this is coming through Ethel's family, Ethel's side of the family, and one of their daughters, Bobby's daughter, coming forward, and changes with Joe, which we've already seen. So he's passed up a couple of things.
Absolutely.
So-
Well, I'd like to say congratulations on the child coming. And
There were a lot of babies this year,
Absolutely.
from the Kardashians to some of the other stars. So
I'd like to kind of switch gears here and talk about your personal career as a filmmaker. Is there any one project or anything like that you feel like really exemplifies your whole career, or anything that you're particularly proud of that you'd like to
it's
share?
coming.
It's coming, wow.
You know,
That's
you always
great.
think you get to a certain plateau, and then the next year you have another challenge that comes your way. So now I'm actually working with Dark Force, which is
Oh, wow.
about a possession, and this is Bill Bean's true life story.
Oh my gosh.
That's been on a haunting, and 2 books that he's written on this, so I'm very happy to have a lead role in that. So now we're getting more into the horror genre.
Wow, that's really fascinating. I can't wait to see some more of that coming up
I
in the months
know.
to come.
I know.
Something that I find particularly interesting is the Ghosts of Fire, those 2 films,
Yes.
in Centralia. How was your experience in Centralia? Can you describe for our
It's,
viewers the story
You
behind
know,
that?
it's amazing. It's an eerie place. Think of Silent Hill, which is
Mhm.
my second favorite horror story. In this, this is totally abandoned. This is a modern day ghost town. It's actually on the historic register as that. And I saw that happen. I went there in the year that it became a ghost town. So that's kind of exciting to go through the progress with this. It's been perpetually burning underground since 1962. Accidentally, intentionally perhaps, set fire that caught into a coal vein. And so it has at least 1,000 years, scientists say, that it can continue burning.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
You know, there's also some political twists there, you know. The coal is actually anthracite coal, which burns at the highest temperature, 300 degrees Fahrenheit. And so this is what they use to make steel. And of course, that's a very important product of Pennsylvania. So was that of value if they made it, you know, took eminent domain, I want to say, of all of Centralia and moved the people out. But of course, they didn't go willingly because it was a boom town. It was like downtown Boston at the time. So this is going back from the 1700s and into 1800s. From that, it became the base of the Union that formed for all of America. And this is the Irish immigrants and Scottish immigrants and Welsh that came over and became coal miners. And they were terribly abused, and still are to this day. It's a very difficult line of work to get into. So there were layers of history once I got out there, and I discovered that there was Native American there initially.
Oh, wow.
No surprise, but you don't talk about it. We don't hear of it. Most of the tribe, the Lenape tribe, was massacred. There's only 500 in existence now.
Wow.
So they're pretty much extinct. So they were moved out of Centralia, and of course the wave of the Irish and Scottish and everything came in there.
Wow. What a tragic story, really. Was there any particular group you were finding more activity from, like the Native Americans or the immigrants themselves? Or
I didn't know what to expect when I went out there. And I do connect with different levels, different eras. So I'm getting Native American. I had a shapeshifter, which was my first personal experience with something like that, which I'm really not into. You know, I was kind of, it was like Bigfoot, you know, and I was kind of on the fence about those types of things. But it's very spiritual as far as shapeshifting goes. And the highest point of Centralia was where the Lenape tribe was buried. That was their burial ground. And it's also a place where they meet and do their dances and rituals. And this is because you can see the whole entire town of Centralia from that high point.
Wow.
So they're buried under there. And of course they took a Roman Catholic church and built it right on top of their grounds.
That doesn't seem like that.
And
would be
on
the best
top
idea.
of those bodies, they put all of the cemetery of the Irish and Scottish Catholic right on top. So, you know, it was just a desecrated area and very disrespected. And so you're getting some activity because of that.
So it seems like almost a perfect storm of so many things you hear about in horror movies is kind of compounding themselves. The
It is.
Native American burial grounds and that being cleared out, but not the actual remains of the people, and then being built upon.
Exactly.
It's really sad.
The twist to this is that underneath is burning. So all of these bodies, whether it goes back to Native American, to, you know, the white man that came in, all of that's going to disintegrate. And these bodies are left there to burn unless the families pay about $30,000 each to have the bodies excavated and moved.
Oh my gosh,
And
that's
some
awful.
can't afford that, and some, you know, their families are gone. And so you'll have a row of headstones that are still there when the rest of the cemetery is empty.
Wow.
So it's very odd, and it's getting weirder and weirder every trip that I make to go out there.
Absolutely. It sounds completely amazing. The things you're telling me, I'm sitting here just like awestruck by how wrong those people were treated and how much activity must really be there. It seems incredible.
Very much so.
Absolutely.
And the coal miners come out, of course, and we have people that were part of the Molly McGuires that come out and speak to us. And I've validated every single name that I came up with, and that's very important to me. And we've contacted the living relatives and had them back.
Oh, wow.
So that was nice, and I've tried to incorporate them live into the films.
That's really nice of you. Actually, I was watching the trailer today, and I saw one lady in particular that was completely in disbelief over what she was seeing with the stone. And
Yes, that was the end of the movie. And so because of talking through spirit, almost a year before I met this woman, by accident we came across her, and she said, "Oh, my family is the Wills." And I remembered the name, and we looked down, you know, I get so many names and everything, and we have to look through records, and I found the Wills. And so I reconnected her with her family.
Oh, wow.
And in that, we found all of these headstones to other relatives that she had been looking for. She also found out she was half Lenape.
Oh, wow.
And she didn't know the kind of tribe, and as I said, they're almost extinct. So it's very difficult to find out even the name of who was out there to find that tribe. And they've moved into Maryland and, you know, moved out of state entirely. So she found a whole other half of her family, and they took her out to the reservation and everything because she was in that movie.
That's so nice. What a wonderful end to that. As that started out, you telling me it sounded so tragic, and it still is, but it's nice that you're able to connect people back to their past
Yes,
like that.
yeah, a lot of magical things happened around this film, a lot more than getting physical activity on film. We had a lot of personal experiences that happened, and I made my ghost story from it that's on the
Mhm.
Bio channel, and they took interest in a piece of that happened, and I was out there with one of the investigators, and James McCann found a relative of his from generations back, his great-grandmother and grandfather, and that was all brought to me through Spirit that happened live right in the film. So Spirit told me where to go, and because I put him in that spot, he was able to find his family.
Wow. Well, congratulations on a rewarding experience as that. Once again, I'm sorry to be hopping around, but my mind keeps going back to your next project, which you were talking about. It sounds like, was the possession aspect, is that something that you haven't really been as involved in the past as other things, or?
No, I do that as well. It's certainly not my main focus, but occasionally this comes up and I have to address it as well. So I do have people that talk to me about possession that's happened, difficulty that comes within a home because it's a negative entity that's come in. And Bill Bean and I connect very well as very close personal friends for years because I actually went through the same thing as a child. That first spirit that I saw as 4 years old stayed with my family for almost 7 years.
Oh my God.
And we had divorces, and we had tragedies, and we had serious accidents, unexplainable illnesses. I had stomach problems and everything that they never were able to say really what happened. Other than, being tied to nerves or, was I nervous because the spirit was there? I'm not really sure. But that kind of stuck with us for years. And this is what you'll see in Bill Bean's family, is that things started to go downhill. From nice, happy, loving family to go right to the bottom.
Oh, wow.
And unfortunately, that's what happened to my family as well.
Now, when you talk about the negative energy that was associated with this spirit, did it ever communicate with you in a very negative way, or was it just its essence and its energy that was so negative?
Now that I look back, I think she was, and it was a female, I think that she was very cunning. I think that she treated me differently than bringing that negativity around the rest of my family, because she was a lady that lived in the house prior to us buying it, and she murdered her 2 daughters, set them all on fire, and herself as well, in the backyard, where I ultimately made contact with her.
Oh, wow.
So it's a very serious case.
Absolutely.
The police won't talk about it, nobody talks about it, and now the house has been taken down. And it was a beautiful home, it wasn't that old, in perfect condition, so it's been removed.
Mm-hmm. How were you guys able to free yourselves of that negative spirit?
We moved.
You moved, okay.
We moved, and she was very much attached to the house, and now becoming a researcher and studying parapsychology through my life, I understand that spirits either attach to a property, sometimes they're attached to the land when we're going back to things that are historical, or they can attach themselves to an individual. So fortunately, she was tied to that house. All that trauma was right there on the property. So as families moved away, all of that tragedy left them. So I did meet the family that bought the house from us, and I went to see them, maybe about 15 years later. And they didn't know who I was. And as soon as I got to the door, I was able to, I'm going to tell you this little piece. I looked through the house and I could see out the back kitchen window, which looked out into the yard. And I saw a beautiful boat out there, like a yacht. It was gorgeous. So I commented on the boat, and the lady looked out the window and she paused for a little bit. She invited us in, so I was sitting at the table with her, And she said, oh yeah, that's a beautiful boat. She said, we haven't touched it in about 10 years, after my husband and my son were killed on it.
Oh my gosh.
So I didn't comment about that, other than, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss, but I didn't tell her anything that went with the house. And she started to tell me everything that happened since she moved into that house. Nothing but extreme tragedy in her life.
Wow, that's awful.
So it was very consistent with what happened to my family.
Absolutely. In your time back there, did you see the spirit or communicate with her at all, unintentionally or anything like that?
No, and I was kind of nervous about going there because I always wondered if she would contact me later. But it was made very clear to me as a child, and again, I was almost 8 years old, and she told me she was going away. And she visited me at night, woke me up, and I sat on the side of the bed. And my grandmother was there, everybody was there watching this happen. And I was very upset because I became very attached to her. She was just part of the family. Mm-hmm. And she said she was going away. And it was very clear to me through clairsentience, where you just know and you understand another person's thought, that I was never going to see her again. So she lifted the floorboard and she went into it, and the floorboard closed over her, and that was the end of it.
Wow. That's...
So...
You're absolutely fascinating, Robyne. Thank you again so much for this. We're not quite done yet. I just wanted to throw in thank you after that wonderful story. Here's a question. In all your experience working with films and stuff like that, have you ever thought about adapting your own life story as a film?
Yes, in fact, I'm writing Love to Bewitch You, and I've said this for a couple of years because I wanted to be perfect before I release this. Mm-hmm. And a couple of the horror stories that I've gone through in my own life, real horror stories, those are going to be in the book. So there's almost every property, I was going to say there's a few, but almost every property I lived in had spirits that were there, and a couple were very, very traumatizing.
It sounds like it, absolutely. Well, I can't wait for that. I know that's probably no timetable on when that will be out, but we will definitely be...
Hopefully this year it'll be finished.
...awaiting it. I cannot wait to read it. You may have just touched upon it there, but is there a singular experience that you can really classify as your most traumatizing, or the worst experience you've had regarding another spirit or something?
Personally, yes. In fact, I was just thinking about the second horror story, true ghost story that's in my book. And this is about my home in Malden. Mm-hmm. And I owned a 125-year-old Victorian, beautiful home, loving, peaceful. You know, people that come to my home know that everything's very calm, and I have fountains and things smell nice and potpourri and all of this.
Sounds great.
Warm,
I'd
fuzzy
love to come over
things.
sometime.
Yeah, it's very peaceful. And yet, the spirits come to me for a reason. When I purchased the house, it was never allowed to be painted. And this was the lady that owned the home. Her son was 72 years old, and he was selling me the home. So we're going back quite some time in the history of the house. Mm-hmm. In all those years, she never allowed it to be painted. And that's because her husband was painting the house. He went into a diabetic coma up on a ladder on the 3rd floor and fell to his death outside. Because he was painting, she associated it with that. So the house had no paint at all. It was practically raw wood when I bought it. And we started to paint the house, of course, and all of that. And then things started happening. So every day around 11:30, there was a slam on the right side of the house. And I'm talking about it sounding like a plane crashed into the house. Wow. Now, I was there alone quite often in the daytime, and I started to wonder what was going on. And so I contacted the city. I tried to find out from neighbors, anybody else that was experiencing this, to make sure there wasn't drilling going on in the area or something happening. There was absolutely nothing. But I started to have family over from time to time, and they heard it. And it was very quick and a slam into the right side of the house. That went on for about 6 months, and I was laying in bed, and I had just had my daughter, my first child, and she was at the other end of the house. I mean, as a new parent, I didn't know better, so I put her bedroom way down the other end. I knew that spirit was there. I woke up and I had that feeling that I usually have. And on the 3rd floor up over me, I heard chains. Now I know that sounds like Charles Dickens or something like that, but we actually had punching bags up there hung up on very heavy athletic chains onto the ceiling. We built a little gym up there. But the chains were up on hooks. So how I could hear them coming across the floor, I didn't understand that. And I thought my husband was home. He's passed away since. But I thought that he was up there. But it was kind of late in the morning, and I knew he would have already left for work. So here I am, and I'm yelling, "Hello? Is anybody there?" And I heard the chains from the other end of the house, and again up over me, slamming to the floor and dragging, like somebody was holding it and running with it, all the way up to over my bedroom. And then it stopped. And I kept saying, "Hello," and nobody was answering. Then I started to wonder if somebody was in the house. And I was pretty nervous because my daughter, a baby, was down the other end in her nursery. But I was absolutely horrified. And spirit doesn't scare me, but the living does. So not knowing if there was a live person in the house, that's really what I was afraid of. I think I would have felt better if I knew it was spirit. But at that time, I was kind of pulling the covers up and bracing myself, and it slammed over my head, and it went the whole length of the house again. And you could hear the chain, the metal hitting the floor. And then I heard walking, and it was very clear it was men's shoes, very heavy. Well, this was probably our friend that had passed away. So then I realized this was something spiritual going on. But how this was going to react to us being there, I didn't know. And it's a terrible thing, but I froze up so badly I couldn't even go to get my baby. I was just frozen in time, and all I could barely do was to move my eyes to look around. And a few minutes later, after I heard it go the second time, it came back again. So now it was like 3 times of that running back and forth. Everything was quiet for a little while, and to me it seemed like hours went by, but it was probably, 5 minutes or so of complete dead silence. Through my door of my bedroom, I could see into the kitchen. And coming up the hallway from where my child was, it entered into the kitchen. And I heard kind of like rustling, almost like the noise of leaves, which is strange inside your home. Mm-hmm. And through those kitchen doors, blowing backwards, was something that looked like out of Pet Sematary. If you remember that woman that was all distorted, and she had a disease and she was in bed and all twisted. Mm-hmm. She looked like that, very similar. She had long, straight hair, and she blew backwards through the door. I mean, it was all in a split second, and her arms were outstretched, and her feet were maybe just inches above the floor, and she was in a nightgown, and her hair and everything was just blowing out in front of her, and she blew out the back door. And that was the end of it. That was it. Everything was gone, and you felt that peace be restored back to the house. And, now I know that sometimes spirit just wants to have their story heard, or they want to be acknowledged, and sometimes that's all it takes.
Wow.
The slam stopped, everything stopped.
That's amazing, incredible, and so frightening. I can't believe.
I found out from the family, because I did let them know this was happening. His father died about 11:30. His mother was making lunch in the kitchen at that time, and she saw her husband fall down in front of the windows. And it was in the kitchen that she was at, and he went down by the kitchen windows. And that's where all this activity took place.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating, Robin. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. I know that must not be a fun thing to look back on.
So that's the worst thing that ever happened to me.
Wow, that's incredible. You mentioned your children. This is one of my last questions. How many children do you have, Robin?
I have two.
Two.
Boy and a girl.
How have they reacted growing up with a mother as clairvoyant as you are? Do they themselves have any type of abilities?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. My daughter was clairvoyant. It's gone away a bit, although she's recently had a couple of sightings happen. She lives in New York, and I told her that there was activity in her apartment, and she has seen some things going on.
Oh, wow.
But as a child, she saw them, and she was more clairaudient, that she was able to hear them speaking to her, and she would tell me whole conversations. And I would hear her in her room having an intelligent conversation with them, and she would describe to me exactly who it was. So, of course, my being a medium, I was able to validate all of that. You know, it wasn't just imagination. My son is half Cherokee, and he has a very special gift, and it's clairsentience, that he senses that something is there. So on our investigations and our film work, I've been able to take him out as a cameraman, and he'll go off on his own. We're over here doing our thing, and he just kind of goes off with what instinctually comes to him, and he gets something on film every time.
Wow, that's incredible. It must be really interesting to have a family just full of people that have all these great gifts.
You know, and I've raised them that they don't know anything differently, so it was never frightening to them. You know, this has been since day one, that spirit is accepted.
Fascinating. Something that I always think is very interesting, I've heard this on a few TV shows and some of the reading that I've done personally, is it true about the children and the imaginary friends sometimes being not really imaginary friends but entities? Does that have any
9 times out of 10 it's not imagination.
Wow.
And I only know that because I experienced it, and I remember all of that I went through, and my family didn't dismiss it. And I work with parents with children that have gifts, and now I teach them. There's quite a difference. And the child knows in the moment there's a difference.
Wow. Well, Robin, this has been an incredible experience for me. I really thank you so much. My last question is, where can my audience go to find information on your services and on your films, and where can we purchase that type of stuff?
Yes, I'm on all of the social websites, and they're all consistently under my name. So it's Robyne Marie, and that's Robyne, Marie.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find me on Facebook and my own website, robynemarie.com. And fortunately, I'm buying a bed and breakfast that's going to be a holistic center that I'm turning it into, and that's in the Pennsylvania area.
Wow. Well, we'll definitely have to check that out.
Yeah.
Well, for everyone at Horde, which right now is myself and my sister, we thank you so much for this interview. It was absolutely entertaining and fabulous, Robin, as you always are. So, Hoarders, one more time, Demonopoly, here with the wonderful Robyne Marie. We all thank her so much. We'll see what's coming up soon. Thank you, guys.